Government fails, the world's off its rails, leaders are whacked, democracy is under attack. It's time to get smart, folks, time to get real. Let's cut through the crap, tell us how you feel. Let's cue the talent, let's meet the host. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome to another podcast by George, still under self-quarantine, going to be that way for a while it looks like, and we've got a lot of podcasts up about the COVID-19 pandemic in specific, but every once in a while we talk politics also, and even music, but it all seems to be related and coming back to the coronavirus, and God, I wished it would warm up. I'm doing this podcast in the snow. It snowed here last night. I still got my winter merch on, by the way. I mean, this is my Black Podcast by George sweatshirt. And I always tell folks, if you want some of this stuff, if you want caps, t-shirts, sweatshirts, whatever, just let me know and I can order them in any color or size. And I don't order them in bulk because there's just not that big of a demand for them. But if you want any of this stuff, just let me know. Well, okay, so let's get to it. The podcast today, I wanted to talk about Bernie Sanders. I wanted to talk with our old friend Victor Tiffany. And the reason, first of all, good morning, Victor. How you doing out there?
Great. Thanks for having me again, George. We appreciate this. Have a very exciting announcement to share with your audience.
Yeah, let's make some news. But for folks that haven't seen Victor on the podcast before, he's been on a couple of times, but let's introduce him. Victor Tiffany is the co-author of a book, Bernie or Bust, and he's got an MA in social science from Binghamton University. He was active in the nuclear freeze movement back in the 1980s. God, that's near and dear to my heart. I love that. He lives in upstate New York. And he's the head of Revolt Against Plutocracy, or the acronym for that is RAP, which I really like, R-A-P, Revolt Against Plutocracy. And for our viewers that, don't have their funk and wagnalls at hand, plutocracy it's what everybody's talking about. It's the oligarchy. It's the world run by the wealthiest and at the expense of the poorest, basically, which is getting us to our subject matter today, this bailout, the CARES package from 2020. I got to tell you, Victor, and I know you're on the front line. You have been for a long time, a big Bernie Sanders supporter, but I haven't seen much from Bernie here in the past few weeks that I'm real happy about. I got to tell you, I'm kind of sour with Bernie at this point in time. That bailout package, I mean, they're peeling back the onion on that thing. I was one of the first to report on Podcast by George that it stinks. It's lousy. And it passed 96-0 in the Senate. It passed with one dissenting voice vote in the House. And now, of course, people are starting to become aware of exactly what's in it. It's 900 plus pages. I don't know how many members of Congress read it before they voted on it. It reminds me of the run-up to the Iraq War. They had that intel report, which was voluminous. Nobody read it. They read the summary, if that, and voted to take us to a war that killed 1 million people under false pretense. And man, you want to talk about being sour, Victor. I've been sour about that ever since. So anyway, if you want to comment on any of what I just mentioned, or if you just want to break the news, that's up to you. Step in here.
Sure. Well, we're going to talk about the $1,200 and the other money that the peanuts that came our way, but that's kind of the second half of our conversation when we talk about a general strike. We're not making any announcements about that. We had a conversation this morning, and I can elaborate on that. But also, just this morning, the three of us on the Revolt Against Plutocracy decision-making committee decided to offer Joe Biden a deal. We're absolutely, we took Bernie or Bust seriously, and we're absolutely not going to support him. We're going to be campaigning against Biden. He has no business being in the White House. He's suffering from progressive dementia. In fact, that's the only thing progressive about Joe Biden. I borrowed that from a meme. I can't take credit for that one.
Yeah.
But we're going to make him an offer, and this is the news that your viewers are going to hear for the first time from anyone, which is if he's willing to make Bernie Sanders his vice presidential pick, We will not campaign against him. We will encourage the Bernie or Busters to support a Biden-Sanders ticket. We're pretty convinced he's going to turn us down, and we're equally convinced he's going to lose in November. So we're making an offer to help win against the odds, because we really don't feel he should even be president because of his condition. I mean, go back to 1972. You and I are old enough to remember this. George McGovern picked Senator Tom Eagleton as his vice presidential pick, and then he had to drop him because it came out that Eagleton had been in the hospital for depression.
And he cried or something like that, and that sunk his battleship. That's exactly right. I remember
but now,
that. Yeah.
The establishment is uniting around a guy in worse shape than Ronald Reagan was in when he left office. Reagan was in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and Biden can't speak as well as Reagan did. We did a survey on Twitter, which of course will be the Burn Your Bus people, my followers for the most part. Who's a better public speaker? Forget the content of the speech. Just who's a better public speaker, Trump or Biden? 94% of my followers on Twitter thought Trump was a better public speaker. Biden's losing it. He just doesn't have what it takes to win.
No, I think you're right. He doesn't have that ability to compete that we so desperately need. Bernie does. He would be the choice from the vice presidential standpoint, and you're right on about Reagan. Not very many people will say what you just said, Victor. And I was there. I was at WHO. You see the Mike flag behind me from my days there, Reagan's alma mater. And I tell everybody on the podcast, and I can find some people maybe that'll back me up. I don't know. But I was telling people at the end of Ronald Reagan's second term that he had it. That he had dementia, that he had Alzheimer's. He was around our station. He'd come through town. He was kind of fond of WHO. I could tell by looking in the man's face that he had what Joe Biden has. And within a couple of years after leaving office, he couldn't even remember who was in his prior cabinet. That's how bad Ronald Reagan was. Nancy had to do a lot of things to help him at the end, including getting from the Air Force One helicopter at the White House in the back door. I mean, really, that's how bad it was, and that's where Joe Biden is at. But, Victor, let me ask you this, because, this isn't your first kick at the can on this Bernie or bust thing. I know this has been talked about before. I've talked to some friends about it that are of your mind, and I've asked them specifically. Now, this was a year or two ago. I said, what if somebody picks Bernie as a vice president? Will that be good enough? Will that keep you from not pursuing the Bernie or bust strategy? And they always said, nah, we're not going to go along with that. It's Bernie or nobody. They're not going to pull that sleight of hand and slide Bernie into an ineffective vice presidential role and get us to vote for somebody like Joe Biden. But that's kind of what I hear you saying.
It is what I'm saying. And the difference is Biden's dementia is progressing rapidly enough that whoever he picks as vice president will become president. So basically what we're saying is, sure, we'll get behind you and we'll vote for you with the clear understanding that you're not going to last long. The 25th Amendment, if he doesn't just resign, the 25th Amendment will be brought into play, and he will have to be replaced by somebody who can complete their sentences and know what cities he's in and remember Barack Obama's name and all these other things that Joe Biden's having a hard time with. I don't think even with Sanders as his pick and with the support of Bernie or Busters, first of all, a lot of Bernie or Busters are not going to go along with this, and we understand that. We can't herd cats, right? There's just too much out there, too much animosity toward Biden and everything he stands for. But we don't think he's going to take this offer up. We don't think he knows he's fading. He knows that Michael Moore had conversations with Democratic Party insiders. They know he's fading, and they think the whole strategy is going to be, well, he's going to pick this bright young woman, and everyone's going to be so impressed by her, and so that when he does fade as the next president, if he somehow manages to get elected, then she'll knock your socks off, and she'll be a great president. The problem is he's not going. If he picks someone like Kamala Harris, we're still not on board. He's not going to get elected because there's going to be so many people unwilling to vote for him, at least if he has Bernie. Then we can make the case, Joe's fading fast, Bernie's going to be the next president. But if he doesn't choose Bernie, then all bets are off. He's going to, before coronavirus, we were arguing that only Bernie beats Trump because we kept always conditioning that claim on under current economic conditions, right? That was always our condition for that claim, that only Bernie beats Trump, because we figured it was going to be a very, very close race. Now we have we're probably on our way toward a depression. We're certainly into a recession, even though technically it's not yet, because of this virus. And this thing's going to go on a while. There was a column today in the New York Times about Singapore. They did a great job repressing this virus initially, and now they're letting people back out and into the workplace and the cases are skyrocketing up again. So the idea that they're going to be able to, get back anything close to normal before there's herd mentality, which means 95% of us come down with this disease or there's a vaccine, it's just unrealistic thinking. So probably any one of those 23 candidates could have beaten Donald Trump this time. We're not in a 2016 election anymore like we thought we were before the economy crashed. We're in more of a 2008. And let me just remind people of what happened in 2008. A full quarter of Hillary Clinton's supporters voted for John McCain, I think because they're racist. They voted for John McCain. The strategy was called Party Unity My Ass. And that wasn't enough to defeat Obama because the economy was in such bad shape. A large swath of voters, these independent voters who lean red or lean blue for the most part, but some of them are genuine swing voters, enough of those independents decided to reject the Democrat or Republicans because the economy tanked under their administration and went with Obama anyway. So we're more in a 2008 environment now. And the only candidate that Trump will be able to defeat is somebody who's corrupt like Joe Biden, demented like Joe Biden, neoliberal like Joe Biden. I mean, I just go into a long list. His relationship, what Hunter Biden is doing and his relationship to a Chinese corporation that got $1 billion from the Chinese government. There's a whole range of reasons Biden just is the wrong guy.
Well, it's a hedge.
In our view, and who was behind this? Who was behind this unifying behind Biden effort? Barack Obama. So if they don't take our offer up and make Bernie the vice president nominee, then what Obama did by orchestrating this unity behind Biden was he made Donald Trump an 8-year president. So in our view, 8 years of President Trump is Barack Obama's lasting legacy.
Well, that's well said. 8 years of Donald Trump. I can't amplify this enough for folks. I talk about it all the time. A second term of Donald Trump may doom mankind. Now that sounds like hysteria, but I'm telling you something. This climate catastrophe that's looming, it has to be dealt with right now. As a matter of fact, we're late. We're way late. Right. These climate scientists are telling us that we have a 10-year window to do something dramatic. And if we spend 4 years doing nothing under a Trump administration, twiddling our thumbs, folks, it could be game over. Well, Victor, I wanted to jump in there a couple of times because when last we talked, you told me that now technically Bernie or bust means I'm voting for Bernie Sanders or I ain't voting for anybody, period.
No.
Okay.
Oh, that's the media's coverage of or bust. Apparently they never went to our website to see what Bernie or bust means. Or bust means we're going to vote our conscience on November 3rd. Vote our conscience, not stay home. The stay home myth came from media just didn't bother looking what or bust means. We're going to vote. Now, we don't know if we're going to vote Socialist Party or Green Party. That's going to be a decision that we're going to make after the Green Party picks their nominee. They're still in a nominating contest. And the two lead candidates are both fully acceptable to us and great progressive candidates. But that's what it means. We're going to vote for a progressive, whether it's the Socialist Party candidate or the Green Party candidate. that will be up to the people who took the Bernie or Bust pledge to decide. We're not going to make that decision. The three of us are not going to make that decision.
Okay, so let me clarify a little bit, and I apologize for that. So Bernie or bust means that you're going to vote for Bernie or a progressive candidate. A crossover voter is somebody that moves from a Bernie supporting role to voting Republican or Democrat for the mainstream nominee. Is that, or have I got this confused? Well, voting for Trump, yeah.
Yeah, they did it. They did it in 2016, and a recent poll indicates 15% of Sanders supporters are going to do it again. Now, they're not, you're right, they're not Bernie or bust. We never advocated voting for Trump. But they are the enforcement arm of our leverage.
That's interesting because the other big thing to be considered is if Bernie were the nominee, and have you considered this? If Bernie were the vice president, which probably is not going to happen just because of Joe Biden, and like you say, that he's very unlikely to do that. But some people would say that if Bernie's in there, and if Bernie's working for his policies like Medicare for all and free college tuition, programs like that, there are mainstream DNC people, the Center for American Progress people, as an example, the Neera Tanden's group. Those folks, they wouldn't tell you, but they may vote for Trump because they're wanting to protect the interests of the donors to the DNC, the financial interests, as opposed to voting for Bernie Sanders, getting his hands on anything. In essence, their primary opponent is not Donald Trump. It's the progressive movement and the things represented by Bernie.
Yeah, that's our thinking. You basically summarized it. We have a meme, actually, that says, uniting around demented Joe is proof that the establishment would rather lose to Trump, would rather beat Bernie and lose to Trump. And then they will. And they will. Unless, they're willing to accept our offer. We will endorse a Biden-Sanders ticket. But otherwise, they can go to hell. And Sanders will be, Trump will be reelected. I also want to speak to your concerns about climate change and Medicare for all. But it's a second subject. I was a guest this morning on what used to be Bernie or Bust television. Ever since Bernie endorsed Biden, the host has changed it to Howell, Howell, Underground. And what we've done recently is stand shoulder to shoulder with Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kulinski and Cooperation Jackson out of Jackson, Mississippi, calling for a general strike, a general, popular, national strike. Now, we've been thinking about that. It's one thing to call for a strike. Yeah, let's go on strike. Everyone, don't go to work. But until we have some demands met, right? So we start on May Day. Everyone's pretty much in agreement. That's a good, nice labor sort of day to start. But who's talking about organizing this thing? Nobody's talking about how do you support the striking workers. Nobody's covering this. So Howell's a labor guy. He's in the union. And I'm an organizer of social media. That's how we built Bernie or Bust. And together we came up with a two-part strategy, totally decentralized. There's no centralized organization that can cover the kind of coordination necessary to link donors, people like me. I have to keep working because I'm in the health care support industry. So I hate to call myself a frontline worker, but I'm like three tiers back, but I'm considered an essential worker in the healthcare. And we don't want them to go on strike. Healthcare is excluded from this general strike because of this crisis we're in. Transport workers are excluded because these hospital doctors and nurses have to get to work. And energy, right? Because how do you run subways? You use fuel. And so you have to have, or if it's a rural doctor driving to the hospital, he needs gasoline. So those three sectors we don't particularly want to see go on strike to support the health crisis that we're in. But the one we really do want to see go on a strike are the food workers, the truck drivers, the people stocking shelves, the cashiers, the cooks, the chefs. All of them go on strike for 2 weeks, and you would see Congress act. Now, so I don't want to get into too many details here, but we're developing a strategy where You call on your local unions. Are you willing to support a general strike? Because they're the ones most likely to prevent fraudsters, con men from taking advantage of people willing to donate money to people on strike, which is the flaw of my strategy. So first choice is to get unions, your local union, to support a general strike starting May 1st. We have in our discussion ways to reach out to them.
Well,
If there's no union, if they won't support the general strike, or there's no union in your county, then the backup plan, in this sort of wildcat strike sort of manner, is to use Facebook groups to couple potential donors with strikers. Now, there's a long process. I don't want to bore your viewers with all the details that have to go into that, vetting the people who are asking for money and so forth. But we can do this. And all these people who are out there calling for a national strike without thinking about how to organize financial support for the strikers need to start thinking about deeper into what this means to have a general strike. So let me go back to climate change, which is the first thing you mentioned. Joe Biden's climate plan got an F- from climate activists.
I know.
Right? So even if he somehow does get elected, that's not going to cut it. So this time around, the general strike will be Medicare for all, perhaps. Again, we're not the ones to make the demands, the strikers will be. But we're in a healthcare crisis, so Medicare for all is something Trump actually said he'd sign. So
right.
That's better than Joe Biden, actually.
Yeah, he's outlefting the Democrats on several of these things.
Democrats,
yeah,
which is something else. It was something Jimmy Dore pointed out. So we can force Congress's hands by basically, if the food workers would get on board with this, starting May 1st, stop going to work. And again, I don't want to go into details on how they can call in. They can call in sick or otherwise, but they can go on at least a 2-week strike by saying by lying. In my view, the end justifies the means on that. Or they can just say, I'm not going to work until President Trump signs Medicare for all, which means they're going on strike in their boss's mind rather than calling in sick. At any rate, this time around, probably Medicare for all, maybe $2,000 a month retroactive to April 1st for everyone, right? Instead of this $1,200, which isn't going to be enough. One-time $1,200 check is a slap in the face to poor people who are struggling, who lost their job, etc. So $2,000 a month and Medicare for all, maybe some other demands, but not a whole lot because we want this to work. And we bring this country to its knees, forcing Congress to act. Trump will sign it. All right. So what about Medicare for all? Well, it doesn't matter who wins. I'm sorry, not Medicare. What about climate change? It doesn't matter who wins. Biden's not going to do the right thing. Trump's certainly not going to do the right thing. So when we think about a national strike, the one that starts May 1st may have to be repeated May 1st, 2021 for, I don't want to call it a Green New Deal, because if it's Trump who's in the White House, he's going to reject it. A lot of people reject it because of the labeling.
Rename it.
A Climate Preservation Act or something.
There you go.
Like that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, that's great. And I'm running out of time. I just wanted to jump in here and say you're exactly right. Maybe we can get those. And if you think that this general strike can't have impact, I'm a former Teamster, Victor. I got a withdrawal card at Local 90. I can, I pay a month's dues. I'm right back in the Teamsters. Everything in this country operates on a truck. The Teamsters are powerful, maybe not as powerful as they once were, but if just they went on strike, my God, there are some independent trucker associations. They had some impact back in the 80s when they were striking about deregulation under Reagan. So I like this, and I've been saying, we need to get in the street. Well, we can't because of the virus. Hell, we can get our cars in the street. You can do a lot of...
Don't need to.
You can
make it. Just go
on
a strike. It sort of fits in with what we're doing now already.
Good on you. I mean, this is great, and I love your call for action, but this brings me back to where I started, and maybe this is where we close, Victor. Where's Bernie? I mean, he's the guy, he's the revolutionary, right? He's the guy that has more following, has more potential impact than any of the unions that you're talking about. I mean, that's what it was all about. He seems to have given up. My God, I watched that live thing that he had with Joe Biden. He was talking about task forces and collaborating with Joe, and What the hell, Bernie? I mean, he needs to be on the front line of what you're talking about as well. Is that not going to happen?
So we're going to make two demands on Bernie. One, he's insider. He can lead this legislative effort. There's going to have to be compromises. Maybe this thing will come out as Medicare for all with private options. That's fine. As long as we get Medicare for all, that's going to be something Bernie can do from inside the Senate. Also, he has his campaign war chest. Rather than donating that to Joe Biden, he can use that war chest to donate to these unions, because we want the unions really to handle the finances at a decentralized level because they're more reliable, they have experience at this sort of thing, rather than using a direct donor recipient Facebook approach, which we'll use in a crunch where there's no union support.
Can you
Bernie
do that?
Can use his war chest.
Can you do that?
Run again. He can use his war chest and donate it to these unions who are supporting the general strike. That's the two things that we're going to demand of Bernie Sanders.
I thought there were some restrictions on those campaign contributions, Victor, where you couldn't use it for things like that. Am I wrong?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That may be a snag.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But even more important than that is just his followings, his email list, people like you that love the man, that are still believers, that are waiting to hear the call. Bernie, make the call, pal. Now's the time. Victor, I could spend hours talking to you, and I try to hold these podcasts to about a half hour or so because they're video now. And I'm not Joe Rogan. I can't go on for 2 hours at a time. I wish that I could. But I appreciate you coming on here. So I want to give you the last word, Victor. Close us out.
Well, I mean, start reaching out. And I'm speaking to you, George. You used to be connected to a union. Reach out to a union and ask them if they're going to be willing to support a general strike with connecting donors with strikers. That would be one thing. And anyone can do this. Anyone listening can do this in their community. It has to be done across the country. And if you can't reach a union because there's no one in your county, set up a Facebook page. You can go to Howl Underground, a YouTube channel, and watch the conversation between Ellen Howl and myself, and we explain exactly how to set up a YouTube group or convert an existing YouTube group into a strike support group for your community, your town, your village, your city, etc. Get on board. It's time. This revolution is not over.
No, and it's going to grow because, like I said, they're just starting to really get into the details of this 900-page CARES Act. And, man, this is going to get people more angry, and it's also going to leave them more desperate. All this money went up, folks. It didn't come down, and that's what Victor is talking about. And now the leverage is gone in the halls of Congress. They already gave the Republicans virtually everything that they want. And to try to, pitch a fit now and try to get another bill passed and try to get a bipartisan bill through Congress it's going to come down to what Victor's talking about. It's us. And that's what Bernie always used to say. It's all about us. Well, folks, that's Victor Tiffany. He's co-author of Bernie or Bust, The Pioneers of Electoral Revolt. Dude's got a master's in social science. I'm always impressed by that. My God, I barely got my bachelor's. I don't know how anybody does that. He was active in the nuclear freeze movement back in the 1980s, and he's the head, and you can see his logo and signage behind him there, the head of Revolt Against Plutocracy, RAP, RAP. Well, that's going to wrap it up. That's going to do it. Thanks again, Victor. We'll check back in again soon. You let us know anytime you want to come on the show, man. You're great. You've got a lot of interesting insight to share. So I really, I've got conservative people on here. I've got liberals. I've got progressives. But you're my Bernie guy, and you're the Revolt guy. So good on you. That's Victor Tiffany. And if you like that, if you like Victor's perspective, if you like the podcast, please like us on Facebook, follow us there, subscribe to us on YouTube, ring the bell so that you get the notifications there, and you can subscribe on iTunes and, my God, Spotify and Google Play and any place that podcasts are seen or heard. But for right now, that's another podcast by George.